Thank you for tuning in to Quillbilly Garage. I'm excited to start this new series titled 1934 Ford Sedan Resurrection. For this episode, I'm just going to do an overview of the car, not work on anything, but give you the backstory, the history on this car. And I apologize ahead of time. As we walk around the car, my shop isn't that big, and so I'm not going to be able to get any far away shots that show the whole thing. This is about the best angle I've got. Anyway, so the story on this is a 1934 Ford four-door sedan. My dad bought this car in 1966. The family had just moved to a new town. He'd gotten a new job, and this car was sitting for sale at a gas station on the way into town. For $125. It had no engine in it, but it pretty much looked just like this. The car has hardly changed since 1966. A little bit more weathered, some damage that I'll talk about, some vandalism, but as far as the paint condition and all that, it looked pretty much like this. It's got a dropped axle in it. That was done back in the day. It had been converted from mechanical brakes to hydraulic brakes back then. We'll go more into that in another episode. So Dad, he went and looked at the car, and he contacted the seller and paid for it, bought the car. Well, somewhere during the time that he'd looked at the car and the time that he paid for it, someone had stolen the steering column and had the Ford accessory glove box radio. They'd stolen that. So before Dad had taken possession. So the seller gave my dad $60 back, I think it was. So ultimately he paid $65 for the car. He ended up buying another 34 Ford sedan as a parts car, and that car had been rolled, I believe, in 1937, and then someone had taken the engine and transmission out. It had just been sitting in some guy's basement, I believe. So he bought the parts car, ultimately paid more for the parts car than this car, $75. So from that, he got a glove box door to put where the radio had been stolen, and he got the steering column out of it, and several other parts that he used on this car and on his 33 Ford Coupe. So let's take a closer look at what we've got here. From this angle, you can see in the grill a black painted skull and crossbones. That was on the car when he bought it in 1966. I think I'll change angles and tell a little more of the history before we take a closer look. So Dad had bought he found a rebuilt 1934 flathead engine for, I think it was $30 that he bought and put in the car. Well, at some point in there, the family moved out of state, and so this car ended up getting towed to my grandparents' house, where it sat for a long time. And when we would come back for summer vacation, Dad would work on the car, and he eventually got it going. He had got the engine in and running. He redid the brakes, what needed doing, and I think it was maybe a birthday present. My mom bought him brand new tires for the car, and those are the tires that are still on it. There are pictures of us when I was young, taken with the car, taken the day that we went driving it around. Dad basically had the car, let's call finished. I don't mean restored, but all together, running, licensed, in about 1975. We still did not live anywhere near where the car was stored. Ultimately, we moved back to the same state, and in the early 80s, Dad had a garage built, and we brought this car and the 33 Coupe from my grandparents home to our house. So my grandparents lived in a desert area and which is great for car storage. You notice here on these brand new tires from 1975, there's still the desert sand embedded in the tire from where it was parked. By the way, one of my earlier videos, maybe one of my first videos that I posted to YouTube, was of getting this car running for the first time in 30 years. And so if you have time, take a look at that video. So after my granddad passed away and the car was still there, people started vandalizing it. The windshield was broken. I've taken it completely out so I can replace the glass. I believe taillights were stolen. I don't know what else. They tried to take a door off and failed. And that would have been hard to find another one of those. With the windshield broken, when my dad had the cars hauled across the state to our house, the wind blew through the broken window and blew the soft top out of the car. Point of interest, I think it was 1982 when he had the two cars hauled across the state. So that's, I don't know, 300 miles, 350 miles. The guy that hauled them charged $200 to go haul two cars back. Quite a bargain. When I was in high school wood shop, I built those new oak top bows for it. So I believe this is the original paint. I don't know for sure. I think it's possible that this front fender had been replaced because you can see the black paint's worn off and there is tan paint underneath. So maybe that fender was replaced off from a tan car. If you go around here to the other fender where the black paint is weathered and worn off, it's showing the original oxide red primer. So the last time this was driven on the road was 1975. In about 1990, we got the car running. The brakes didn't work anymore, but and I drove it around the yard when I was a kid, teenager. Once. That was a one-time thing, and then it went back in the garage. Like I say, Dad essentially had the car at some level of finished at one point. It just went downhill from the vandalism and things like that. And then as I grew up and got my own car projects, my dad was great, and his cars went on the back burner as he helped me with my projects. So you can see there the glove box is a different color, as is the ashtray, because they're not original to the car. Take a look inside. So I'm calling this resurrection, not a restoration, because my intention is to fix all the mechanicals that need fixing, clean it up good, make the best of the original paint, put a top in it. I've got an interior kit that Dad had bought for it, but I don't plan on disassembling anything that doesn't need to be disassembled. The car, I think it's a nice survivor, and I'd like to keep that look. Plus, it's the way I always remember it. The old pictures of me and my brother and my dad with the car, it looks essentially just like this. I don't know what these window crank knobs are made out of, but I think you can see here that they're kind of chewed up. Well, that's from rodents. They would stand on the armrest and chew on the knobs. Whoever did the minor bit of hot rodding were customizing to this car back in the day, which, like I said, doesn't add up to much. They put a dropped axle in it, but they also took the window garnish moldings and the dashboard and painted them this silvery blue color. Originally, they would have been either a wood grain texture, or I think this, if it wasn't a deluxe car, I think the standard color was maroon, possibly gray. By the way, I welcome and look forward to your comments. So this door here, Dad and I pulled the door panel off to replace the broken window, and we hadn't figured out how to remove the glass, so we'll figure that one out. On these old Survivor cars, I appreciate seeing little windows into the past, like the stickers for safe driving, American Automobile Owners Safety Association member. Then on the back window we have a Superior Performance Products. Point of interest, on the back bumper you see these little spots, these little white drips. That is rubbing compound, probably from about 1988, 89, 90, somewhere in there. My dad had painted his 1963 Studebaker Avanti and with lacquer, and that was from buffing it, just a little splatter from buffing the car nearby. There is a good shot of those brand new 1975 tires. I think I'm probably going to want to change those, but they still hold air. So this fender had a little body damage to it, and my dad took it off. He felt very strongly about not using body filler, and so he was hammering and filing, and I don't know all the right terms, but he was getting that fender straightened out. He did a pretty good job of it. It's not quite perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. So I have that fender, and it'll go back on the car as part of this whole process. Interesting to see the old safety glass delaminating. Okay, now there's a sticker that's not vintage. I think I stuck, that's probably off of, I don't know what that's off of, but I probably stuck it there when I was a teenager. When Dad was putting this together, remember I said he had the parts car. Well, he didn't have a lot of space to store extra parts, and he was moving, and so the parts car had to go away. He had the two cars he was fixing up, the sedan and then the 33 coupe, and so he took all the best parts of the three and put them on the two, and then all the leftover stuff probably went away with that parts car. But anyway, the parts car was also a four-door sedan. Between this car and the parts car, one had the deluxe mohair interior and the other did not. And when my dad swapped out all the best pieces, he swapped them out regardless of if they were the standard or the deluxe interior. He did it solely on condition, and so, well, now it's all in pretty bad shape, but some of the upholstery is mohair and some of it's not. I do have a new upholstery kit that Dad purchased several years ago that's the mohair. Got a couple holes here in the firewall and the cowl from old aftermarket radio antenna. Well, thank you for tuning into this episode of Quillbilly Garage. I hope you found this first installment of the 1934 Ford Sedan Resurrection interesting, and I will continue to post more videos. The next one will probably be about doing the brakes. Again, this was converted from mechanical to hydraulic way back in the day, probably in the 50s. I have already started taking some of that apart, and I got to say that the way they mounted a master cylinder was kind of ingenious, kind of sketchy. I'm sure it was safe-ish. Anyway, I'll show you how that all worked and what I'm going to do to make it better. And then down the road, I'm going to get the glass in it. I mentioned that long ago I did a video of getting this engine running. Well, that was running off of a gravity-fed gas can that I had hanging there. Didn't run it for very long, so I do need to get it running again, clean out the fuel system, get that all, in good order. Anyway, that's all for now. Thanks again for tuning in, and like I said before, I appreciate your comments, tips, stories. Until next time, thank you.